My name is Yara Kessler, 26 years old. I woke at 9 to a silence so complete it sounded deliberate, like someone had pressed a hand over the mouth of the house. Thanksgiving mornings in the Kessler home were never quiet. Usually the upstairs hall carried smells before voices, sage and butter, the throat-coating warmth of roasting turkey sneaking under doors. Dad would blast the parade like a public service announcement from the living room. Corbin and Sloane would wage their annual bathroom war, doors slamming, water running, hair dryers screaming. Even Rhett, who could sleep through a hurricane, made noise when he shuffled for cereal. Today there was nothing, only the furnace clicking on and settling into that steady hum, as if it were the only one who remembered how to stay. I sat up, listening harder. No cabinets, no footsteps, no water. Hello? My voice felt too loud in the stillness, and too small. I reached for my phone, expecting a text, ran out for cranberries, or at least a missed call. The screen was clean. No messages. The wallpaper, a photo of our driveway I took after the first dusting of snow, felt like a joke. The hardwood was cold under my feet as I crossed the hall. Corbin's door stood open, bed made, perfectly smooth, as if no one had slept in it. Sloane's room was the same. Throw pillows arranged precisely, vanity clear, perfume lined up like soldiers. Rhett's door, always half closed, always messy, yawned open onto a neatly made bed and an absence that felt smug. Downstairs, the kitchen was too tidy. No thawing turkey, no grocery bags, no lists curling at the corners from oven heat. My coffee mug from last night sat alone in the sink, a ring of brown at the bottom, like it had been left behind as a marker. I opened the fridge out of muscle memory. Bare shelves, a stubborn jar of pickles, half a lemon that looked like a shriveled moon. I pulled the curtain over the front window. The driveway stared back empty. Mom's sedan, gone. Dad's ancient SUV, gone. Even the 7-seater I'd filled with gas yesterday for our drive to Uncle Dean's, gone. I held the fabric between my fingers until the roughness bit. The first stupid explanation came easy, a last-minute grocery run. But the air felt different, not recently disturbed, not lived in. Cold, abandoned. I tried Mom's number out of habit and blinked when it wasn't where it should be. Her contact was gone. Dad's too. I scrolled, the truth landing in slow increments like hail. Corbin, Sloane, and Rhett. Deleted. My mouth went dry. I saw it then. Last night in the living room, Rhett had wandered in with that sheepish grin he thinks works on everyone. Hey, sis, can I check the game? My phone's dead. I'd handed over mine without thinking. He'd collapsed on the couch, pretended to scroll while we watched a replay of the parade floats. 19 years old and still allergic to chargers. I could almost see his thumb moving, quick and practiced. It would have been clever if he'd been smarter. He deleted the contact entries, not the logs. I remembered most numbers by heart anyway, and Uncle Dean's was muscle memory. I tapped it in, pacing the kitchen as it rang. Hello? His voice sounded too bright, like a postcard. Uncle Dean, it's Yara. Where is everyone? A pause that scraped the line. Yara? Oh, you're still home? My stomach tightened. From his end, a whisper of sound, waves. A ukulele somewhere off to the left, lazy and unmistakable. Not the flat stretch of our New England suburb. Where are you? I asked, though my body already knew. Ah, he said, voice dropping like he wished it could hide. Your parents wanted a big surprise for their 30th. They all flew to Maui last night. All of them, I said, pinning each word down. They figured you were busy with work, he added quickly. And, well, they didn't want you to worry about the expense. The expense. The cabinets blurred for a second, the counter edge too sharp under my palm. In the background, a voice I'd know underwater. Sloane, laughing. Are you talking to her? I thought the plan was just let her stay home. Krista, he started, using the wrong name in his panic. I ended the call. The kitchen absorbed the click and handed me back only the hum of the furnace. For a moment, I waited for the familiar wave to roll me. Hurt, betrayal, then the hot fizz of tears. I'd swallow out of habit. None came. Instead, a coolness spread through me, clear as glass. 6 years unspooled in my head like a tape, played too long on low volume, finally cranked up. I saw the numbers the way I always saw them, in tidy columns. Mortgage, $2,800. My monthly contribution, as Mom called it, $2,000. Their share, $800. 72 months, $144,000. Not invested, not saved, absorbed. I saw temporary difficulty the day I moved back after community college. Mom's eyes so wide with practice worry that the whites looked like crescents. Just until we're back on our feet. Dad's demotion had been a story with chapters. This quarter, next quarter, 3 years of restructuring. In those same years, his collection of vintage model cars in the basement grew and gathered dust in glass coffins. Corbin's $50,000 entrepreneurship fund evaporated without a product, a website, or a plan. Sloane's $38,000 a year tuition and sorority dues drew fresh ink from accounts like it was hydration. The ledger sorted itself. My paychecks into gutters, property taxes, Wi-Fi that turned our house into a small city. Their comforts itemized in my memory. The 80-inch 4K I bought with my bonus, the front-loading washer-dryer Sloane insisted a civilized household needed, the 4-door smart fridge I replaced during the July heat wave. Every receipt had a date. Every warranty had my name. Upstairs, the smallest bedroom, the one with the water stain like a map of an island, held my filing cabinet. I pulled the bottom drawer and slid out the 3-inch binder. It came up heavy, familiar, the plastic cool under my hands. Behind me, the house watched. It felt like standing on a stage and finally finding your lines. On the kitchen table, I opened the binder to the colored tabs. Television, appliances, utilities, internet. Each page tucked behind plastic sleeves, copies of bank statements highlighted. Where purchases became ongoing, where responsibility edged into ownership. I didn't book a flight. I didn't compose an email with the subject line, "How dare you?" I Googled movers. Most were closed for the holiday. One ad glowed like a dare. Premium holiday emergency moves. Yes, today. Double the rate. Fine. Reliable movers, this is Troy. Hi, Troy, I need to move tomorrow morning. A beat. Professional surprise. We can do 8 a.m., ma'am, but our holiday rates... That's fine, I said. I need a truck that can handle major appliances and a few large items. We can handle that. Address? I gave it. Called a property manager next. Found a studio 30 minutes from work offering immediate occupancy for an additional fee. I paid the deposit while the representative apologized for the holiday inconvenience and scheduled to sign the lease tomorrow afternoon. I made a list, not out of anger, not even out of efficiency. Inventory. In the living room, the 80-inch TV. My bonus, March last year. The soundbar I bought on sale in May. The receipt still clipped to the warranty. The rugs I bought because Mom said the old ones made the place look cheap, which was apparently a sin worse than debt. In the kitchen, the smart fridge, the espresso machine Corbin and Sloane used like communion, the dishwasher that didn't slam anymore because I'd paid for the soft close model. Down the hall, washer, dryer. In the office corner, the router and 3 mesh nodes that turned everyone's streaming habits into entitlement. Outside the bare window, the late November sky folded itself into gray. I could almost hear Maui if I went quiet enough, waves popping like knuckles on a distant hand, the ukulele's soft pluck. For the first time, the sound didn't hit me like longing. It sounded like a soundtrack to a different movie, one I wasn't in. I packed my clothes, jewelry, the books I'd bought and actually read. I left their souvenirs, their framed family photos with me as a prop in the corner. My name misspelled on the back of one from a Florida trip I'd funded but hadn't attended. I threw away the science experiments in the fridge and slid dry goods into boxes for my car. When the sun slipped behind the bare maple in the yard, the house settled into that pre-snow hush. I walked through the rooms the way people walk a property before closing, noting condition. I photographed walls where brackets would leave no scars, counters without scratches, floors without gouges. Evidence, not for court, not yet, but for myself. A record of how I learned the difference between ours and mine. Back at the table, I set the binder in front of me and traced the spine with my fingertip. the plastic seam slightly raised like a healed wound. A stupid part of me wanted to cry then, not from loss, but from the realization of how long I'd kept my head down, how efficiently I'd been the system that ran this house. A sturdier part of me stood up instead. I opened my laptop. The Reliable Movers confirmation email already glinted at the top of my inbox. Subject line all caps like it was cheering me on. I replied with a neat bullet list of items, cereals included. I scheduled utility cancellations, power, water, internet, final readings requested, forwarding address set to the studio I'd see tomorrow. I left the Ring account active and took a breath, one loose end on purpose. Upstairs, I stripped my bed, slid the premium mattress protector I'd bought into a box, and left the cheap box spring that came with the house. In the bathroom, I folded the single soft towel I'd purchased with a gift card and put their fraying ones back on the rack. I brushed my teeth with the travel kit from my purse, the mint sharp and clean. The house was quieter than I had ever known it. It didn't feel like grief. It felt like alignment. On the way to my room, I paused at the kitchen counter where the wreath Mom bought at a discount hung on the pantry door. I took down the family calendar, Thanksgiving circled in my handwriting, and beneath it a tidy list: clean guest bath, gas up SUV, pick up wine. I slid the calendar into the trash and set my keys beside the empty mug. Not yet. Tomorrow. I checked the lock on the front door, felt the solid catch of the deadbolt. In my room, I lay on the stripped mattress pad with a blanket pulled around my shoulders and stared at the water stain shaped like an island. It used to look like an escape. Tonight it looked like what it had always been, damage that had never been fixed. I slept lightly, dreamless, the kind of rest that feels like a held breath. When the thin winter sun woke me, I opened my eyes already dressed in the decision I'd made. The binder waited on the table. The phone glowed with the time. The furnace hummed. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering for a second over no one in particular, then pressed call. Troy, it's Yara on Oakwood Lane. I'll meet your crew at the door at 8. We're starting in the living room. The big TV comes down first. The movers arrived on the dot at 8 a.m. 3 men in matching blue jackets stepping out of a truck that rumbled into the empty driveway like punctuation at the end of a sentence I'd been writing for 6 years. The morning air smelled faintly of snow and gasoline. The foreman, a man in his 40s with calloused hands and patient eyes, adjusted his clipboard and smiled. Miss Kessler? Yes. We're ready when you are. Let's start in the living room, I said, tucking the 3-inch binder under my arm. Inside, the house was a stage stripped of its actors. The leftover smells of detergent and cold coffee hung faintly in the air. It wasn't sadness that hit me, it was clarity. The first act was over. The foreman's eyes widened when he saw the 80-inch TV mounted to the wall. That's impressive. My bonus from last March, I said, flipping the binder open to a page neatly labeled Television, Invoice, Serial, Warranty. Purchased by me, installed by me, and covered under my account. He nodded, whistled low, understood. The men moved with practiced precision. One unplugged cables, another balanced the weight as they lifted, and within 10 minutes the screen was swaddled in protective blankets. No shouting, no chaos, just efficiency. Bracket stays, I reminded them, came with the house. I led them to the hallway next. Washer and dryer, both from my Lowe's receipt tab, page 6. The machines gleamed white and silent, the same ones Sloan had complained the old models were from the Stone Age. She'd wrinkled her nose that day, like touching the old washer might contaminate her manicure. God, Yara, can we please have something that doesn't smell like coins and despair? I'd swiped my card, of course. As the men disconnected the hoses, I stared at the faint mark on the wall where Mom had once pinned her to-do list. Check mail, pay mortgage, ask Yara to call electric. My name always next to the verbs that kept the lights on. By the time they rolled the washer onto the dolly, I could feel the house hollowing out. Every scrape of rubber against floorboards sounded like release. In the kitchen, the foreman paused at the refrigerator. That's a beauty, he said, admiration slipping into his voice. 4-door smart fridge, I replied. Bought during the July heat wave when the old one died. It's empty? It is now. I'd cleared it out last night, packed what I needed into the small cooler waiting by the front door. I'd also found a fallen magnet behind it, a photo of a Hawaiian sunset, the edges curled with age. I turned it over before tossing it in the trash. On the back, Mom's handwriting. Our dream vacation someday. I smiled faintly. Guess they finally made it. The foreman didn't hear me over the creak of the dolly wheels. They wrapped the fridge, maneuvering it carefully through the doorway. The gaping hole it left behind exposed unpainted wood, faint outlines where dust hadn't settled in years. Next came the espresso machine, Corbin and Sloane's sacred altar. Neither had ever bought a single bag of coffee beans, yet every morning they'd use my machine as if caffeine were an entitlement. "Careful with that," I said, and the movers nodded. They handled it like glass. One of the younger men glanced around, curiosity pricking his expression. "You moving out alone?" "Yes." He opened his mouth as if to ask why, then seemed to think better of it. "Everything's ready, ma'am." "Thank you," I said. "We'll continue upstairs." The stairs groaned under our steps, unused to this much purposeful movement. My bedroom looked stripped already. Dresser empty, bookshelf bare, the premium mattress rolled and taped by dawn. The cheap box spring I'd left behind sagged in the middle, a perfect metaphor. They packed in silence while I stood by the window, binder open. Each page was a small victory, proof that I hadn't imagined my contributions. Proof that being the responsible one had been a role I could finally resign from. At noon, the foreman wiped his hands on a rag. "Taking our lunch break, Miss Kessler. Be back in 20. "Take your time," I said. When the door shut, the house exhaled. I wandered through what was left. Echoes of footsteps, rectangles of lighter paint where pictures once hung. I'd always thought I'd feel guilt stripping it bare, but instead I felt something like honesty. The house was showing its bones for the first time. I walked into the living room. Without the TV, the wall looked naked. Without the rugs, the floor gleamed in patches where sunlight still touched. I crouched, tracing a faint dent in the wood, a memory of Dad dropping his golf bag and leaving it for me to fix. "This isn't destruction," I murmured. "This is reclamation." By 4 p.m., the last box was sealed. The foreman handed me a clipboard. "We're all set." "Delivery address?" he asked. I gave him the new studio's address, paid the invoice in full, and added a generous tip. "Thank you," I said. "You've done more than you know." He nodded, respectful. "Good luck, Miss Kessler." When the truck rolled away, the sound of its tires faded down the street, leaving a silence that didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I re-entered the house. It smelled of nothing now. Clean air and wood polish. I started recording with my phone, walking from room to room, narrating like an insurance adjuster. No damage to walls. Floors intact. Cabinets unbroken. My voice sounded detached, almost serene. In the kitchen, the refrigerator's outline glared back, a pale rectangle surrounded by dust. I spotted the small pile of bills on the counter. Water, power, internet, all in Mark and Brenda's names. I stacked them neatly beside my house keys. Upstairs, I took one last look at my childhood room. Bare walls, open closet, faint circle where a clock once hung. The water stain on the ceiling looked larger in the afternoon light, less like an island now, more like an escape route that had always been waiting for me to notice it. I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened my laptop. First, the power company. "Yes, I need to cancel service at 1342 Oakwood Lane. The account is under Yara Kessler." The operator's tone was professional. "May I ask why you're canceling?" "I'm moving," I said. "Simple. We'll perform a final meter reading tomorrow. Power will disconnect by 5 p.m. Do you have a forwarding address?" I gave the new one, then the water company, then the internet provider. Each call shorter than the last. No emotion, no hesitation. By the time the last confirmation email arrived, the sun was melting into orange and mauve through the kitchen window. I made tea in a chipped mug, the only one I'd kept out of sentiment. The rest sat packed and labeled in the car. When night fell, I plugged in a single lamp, its cone of light cutting a circle in the darkness. The house was silent again, but not the kind of silence that scared me this time. It was the silence of a finished chapter. I showered in the empty bathroom, dried off with the towel I'd saved, and spread a blanket on the bare floor. The hardwood creaked beneath me, like an old friend shifting to make room. I slept deeply, dreamlessly. At dawn, I packed the last of my things into the trunk of my car. My binder went on the passenger seat. In the kitchen, the unpaid bills waited on the counter, my keys resting on top like punctuation marks. I looked around one final time. 6 years of my life, measured in receipts and obligations, distilled to this: clean walls, quiet air, and proof that I'd never been crazy for wanting out. I locked the door from the inside, pulled it shut, and felt the latch catch with a soft, decisive click. Standing on the porch, I drew one slow breath of cold morning air, then whispered to the empty house, "Lesson over." As I walked down the driveway, frost crunched under my shoes. My car waited, small, unassuming, mine. When the engine turned over, the radio flicked on automatically. A static burst, then music. Hawaiian guitar. I laughed once, quietly, and turned it off. 6 days. That's how long before they'd come home. 6 days before the silence they left me with would greet them back. "Tick-tock," I said softly, and drove away into the gray November morning. 6 days later, the house woke up without me. I didn't have to imagine the scene. It unfolded live on my phone. I was sitting in my new studio apartment, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, watching the Ring app I'd purposely never disconnected. The tiny blue light blinked to life at 3:14 p.m., capturing my family's triumphant return from Maui. There they were, Mark and Brenda Kessler, tanned and tired, dragging their oversized luggage up the front walk. Corbin and Sloan in matching floral shirts, sunburnt noses peeling, looking like vacation had been a full-time job. Rhett stumbled behind them with his duffel bag, still wearing his plastic lei like a child clinging to proof of joy. I turned the volume up. "Don't forget, the light switch by the door sticks sometimes," Mom called to Dad. He chuckled and fumbled with the keys. The lock turned and they disappeared inside. 3, 2, 1. "Mark?" Mom's voice echoed faintly through the speaker. "The lights aren't coming on." A shuffle, a click. Dad's muffled reply. "Probably the breaker. Give me a sec." Another pause. "Nothing's working," he called out. I could picture him in the dark hallway, tapping switches with growing irritation. "Did you forget to pay the bill?" Mom snapped. "Me, you handle the utilities." I smiled, sipping my coffee. The app camera caught Corbin pushing past them, his phone flashlight cutting through the dim living room. The beam jerked suddenly and stilled. Dad?" His voice rose an octave. "Where's the TV?" More light beams flickered through the feed, one from Sloane's phone, another from Rhett's. Their flashlights darted over the bare walls, the blank space where the smart fridge had once stood, the counter where the espresso machine had lived. "What the hell?" Mark's voice thundered. "Where's everything?" Sloane's shriek pierced through the speaker. "The fridge is gone! All of it's gone! The screen caught Mom staggering backward, clutching her souvenir pineapple like a weapon. "Someone broke in," she cried. "Call 911." I watched Dad fumble for his phone, hands shaking. He began explaining to the dispatcher that the house had been cleaned out during their trip. Behind him, Corbin paced, scanning for an answer. "The Ring camera," he said suddenly. "We can check the footage." Of course he would think of that. Corbin, the self-proclaimed tech genius who'd once burned through $50,000 of family investment for a startup that never launched. He pulled out his phone, opened the same app I was using. The silence that followed was almost sacred. I knew the precise moment he found it. The footage from 5 days ago. His expression collapsed like wet paper. His mouth fell open. His voice cracked. "She took everything." "What?" Mom rushed to his side. "Yara, she took it all." The others crowded around, faces reflected in the glow of his phone screen. I could picture the video playing, me in black jeans and a jacket, clipboard in hand, directing the movers with calm authority. No rage, no chaos, just quiet order. "Krista did this?" Mom gasped, using my old nickname. "She can't, this is theft," Dad barked. Sloane scoffed, eyes flashing. "She's lost it. I told you she was acting weird." I muted the audio. Watching was enough. They poured back onto the porch, the November sunlight catching their confusion, their fear, their disbelief. They looked smaller than I remembered. My phone buzzed again. Incoming call. Unknown number. Then another. Then 5 more. I let them ring. They would come here next. I knew it before the knock came. By 4 p.m., my building's intercom buzzed. "Miss Kessler?" The front desk attendant's voice was careful, neutral. "There are police officers here asking to speak with you. They say your family is with them." I set my coffee down. My pulse was steady. "Tell the officers they can come up alone," I said. "No one else." 3 minutes later, 2 sharp knocks. I opened the door. 2 officers stood in the hallway, one younger, clean-cut, with a name tag that read Brennan. The other older, silver hair, hands clasped behind his back. "Ms. Kessler?" the younger one said politely. "We're responding to a report from your family claiming that you've removed property from their home." I stepped aside. "Come in." The studio was bright and spare. My television sat against the wall. The espresso machine gleamed on the counter. my washer and dryer tucked neatly into the nook beside the bathroom door. Everything fit perfectly. Everything was mine. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked. Officer Brennan blinked. Sure. Black?" As the older officer wandered the small space, scanning the appliances, I poured 2 cups and set them on the table. Then I reached for my binder, the same one that had once sat like ballast under my arm as I walked out of the house. I placed it in front of them, opened it to the first tab, television. "This should clarify things," I said calmly. Brennan flipped through the pages. Receipts gleamed behind plastic protectors, warranties with my name printed cleanly, bank statements highlighted in yellow. He paused at the invoice for the fridge. "You purchased this last July?" "Yes." "The TV?" "March of last year, my year-end bonus." He kept turning pages, murmuring softly. "Washer, dryer, espresso machine, all paid directly by you." His partner leaned closer, nodded once. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite read, the kind professionals share when a situation deflates quietly. Finally, Brennan closed the binder. "Everything appears to be in your name, Ms. Kessler. Legally, you've removed property you purchased yourself. You're within your rights." He hesitated, then added, "Do you want us to file a harassment report against your family?" For a long second, the question hung in the air. I could still hear them downstairs in the lobby, Mom crying, Dad arguing, Sloan pacing. The sound was faint through the window, but familiar, like background noise from another life. "No," I said finally, "that won't be necessary." Brennan gave a small, understanding nod. "We'll handle it." When they left, I didn't follow them to the door. I didn't need to watch what came next. Through my open window, I heard the argument unfold in the parking lot. My father's voice, sharp and righteous. My mother's sobs. The older officer's firm, patient tone. "It's a civil matter. She has documentation for all items in question. If you don't leave the property, we'll have to cite you for trespassing." Then silence. A car door slammed. Another. I stood still, one hand on the edge of the window frame, the other resting on the binder. 6 years of being the dependable one. 6 years of paying without acknowledgement, carrying without thanks. 6 years of being told to be grateful for inclusion that was never real. Now, the scales had balanced. When the last sound faded, I closed the window and turned back to the quiet of my apartment. The espresso machine hissed softly as it finished its cycle. I poured myself a cup, leaned against the counter, and exhaled. Freedom didn't always look like celebration. Sometimes it looked like order. Sometimes it sounded like silence. 3 weeks passed before I saw them again. It happened in the produce aisle at Greenway Market, of all places, between pyramids of apples and baskets of lemons. I was pushing my cart, headphones in, halfway lost in thought, when a familiar voice cut through the static. "Yara!" I froze before turning. Sloan stood there, arms crossed, jaw tight, her perfect manicure chipped. Corbin hovered just behind her, looking less polished than I'd ever seen him, hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. For a heartbeat, no one said anything. The store hummed around us, a child whining by the grapes, the crackle of a distant loudspeaker. "This isn't funny," Sloan hissed finally. "Mom's crying every day. You need to fix this." I blinked, almost amused. "Fix what?" "You know what," Corbin snapped, stepping closer. "You went too far. You can't just strip the house bare like some burglar and—" "Actually," I interrupted, "that's exactly what I can do when I own everything I took." His jaw worked soundlessly. Sloane's face flushed, her composure wobbling. "You humiliated us," she said, voice shaking. "The neighbors think we were robbed." I placed a bag of Honeycrisp apples into my cart and met her eyes. "Then maybe you should have told them the truth." Corbin's tone shifted, pleading now. "Just turn the internet back on, Yara, please. I need it for job applications." "You're 28, Corbin." I pushed my cart forward. "Get your own Wi-Fi." Their protests faded as I walked away, leaving them stranded among the fruit. For once, I didn't feel the usual pull to justify, to explain. I didn't owe them translation anymore. 2 months later, a manila envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name, written in Mom's looping script. Inside was a summons to small claims court. They were suing me for theft of family property and emotional distress. The claim was for $5,000. I laughed out loud, an involuntary sound that startled even me. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom felt smaller than I'd imagined. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, polished benches that smelled faintly of varnish and old paper. My parents sat across the aisle, avoiding my gaze. Corbin and Sloan weren't there. probably too embarrassed or too tired to wake up early. When the clerk called, Kessler versus Kessler, the irony was almost poetic. Dad went first, standing stiff and righteous behind the plaintiff's table. Your Honor, he began, my daughter removed property belonging to her family. She left us without essential appliances, forcing us into hardship. We're only asking for fair compensation. The judge, a tired man with wire-rimmed glasses, leaned back in his chair. What kind of property are we talking about? The television, refrigerator, washer, dryer, household items she purchased for family use, Dad said. The judge raised an eyebrow. Purchased by whom? Dad hesitated. By Yara, but for the family. Gifts. Mom's voice broke in, trembling and performative. She lived under our roof rent-free for years. We trusted her. I stood when the judge nodded toward me. Your response, Ms. Kessler? I didn't speak. Instead, I placed the 3-inch binder on his desk. The sound it made was sharp and final. He opened it. The pages gleamed under the overhead light. Receipts, warranties, bank statements, each labeled with dates and payment methods. 5 minutes passed as he flipped through, his face changing from polite patience to dawning understanding. Mr. Kessler, the judge said finally, these documents show that your daughter purchased and maintained these items with her own funds. Furthermore, I see recurring evidence that she contributed $2,000 monthly toward your mortgage for 6 years. He looked up, his voice hardening. Is that correct? Dad shifted in his seat. Well, yes, but... And you're claiming she stole property she bought with her own money? Mom's protest came sharp and desperate. It was for the family! The judge's expression flattened. Mrs. Kessler, do not interrupt me again. He turned back to Dad. This case is dismissed. And frankly, I'd caution you against filing frivolous claims in the future. Perjury is a serious matter. He brought down the gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a door slamming shut. My parents didn't look at me as they left. I didn't look at them either. Outside, the cold air bit at my cheeks. I drew a long breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. The courthouse steps gleamed with frost, each one a rung out of the past. 3 weeks later, Uncle Dean called. He didn't bother with small talk. The house is gone, he said quietly. Foreclosed after 3 months. They couldn't make the payments. Where are they living now? A 2-bedroom rental across town. Mark and Brenda took the master. Rhett's on the couch. Sloan and Corbin are sharing the 2nd bedroom. He hesitated. Sloan had to transfer out of Westlake. Too expensive now. I didn't say anything for a moment. They're really struggling, he added softly, that practiced guilt woven into his tone. They didn't ask me to call, but... Then they're not struggling enough, I said. The steadiness in my voice surprised us both. He sighed. You know, your mom says she doesn't understand why you did it. Tell her it's because I finally learned math, I replied. After the call, I made dinner in my tiny kitchen. Roasted vegetables, a glass of wine. Nothing fancy, but entirely mine. The walls glowed amber in the light. There were no raised voices, no guilt hovering in the corners, just peace. The next morning, a notification blinked on my phone. LinkedIn message. Corbin Kessler has sent you a request. I opened it. Hey, sis, hope you're doing well. Got an interview at Meridian Tech next week. Any chance you could be a reference? You know how reliable I am when I put my mind to something. For a moment, I stared at the message. Then I clicked ignore, and then block. Sometimes closure doesn't arrive as an apology or confession. Sometimes it arrives as a button you press once. I closed the app, brewed my coffee, and stepped onto the small balcony of my studio. The air was crisp, the city waking quietly beneath me. I took a sip and let the quiet stretch. No noise, no demands, no expectations. Just silence. But this time, it belonged to me. Winter came quietly that year, without ceremony. The first snow drifted over the city like powdered sugar, coating rooftops and cars in a soft disguise. From my balcony, I watched flakes swirl under the streetlights, dissolving before they touched the ground. Inside, my apartment glowed with the kind of calm I used to mistake for loneliness. It wasn't loneliness, it was peace. Every bill that arrived had only my name on it. The rent, the utilities, the Wi-Fi, all mine. The sound of the coffee machine each morning was steady, unhurried. No one shouted through doors. No one complained about breakfast. No one left half-drunk mugs scattered on the counter. I'd built a small routine, the kind that didn't look impressive to anyone else but meant everything to me. Morning coffee, work emails, evening walks to the market. A life measured not by what I owed, but by what I chose. Sometimes, though, the past found small ways to visit. One afternoon, I got a message from Aunt Lisa, Mom's younger sister, the only relative who hadn't picked a side. "They're still talking about you," she wrote. "Your mom says she forgives you, says you can come home any time." I smiled at the absurdity of it. "Forgives me." She continued. "They are telling everyone you had a breakdown, that you're still recovering." "Let them," I replied. "If rewriting history helps them sleep, they can have the story." Lisa called that evening. "They lost the car," she said softly. "Mark's working part-time at the hardware store now. Brenda's been selling jewelry online." "I hope she gets a fair price," I said. Lisa hesitated. "You sound happy." "I am." The silence on the line was understanding, not pity. "Then don't let them drag you back." "I won't," I promised. After we hung up, I made tea and stood by the window. Below, the city was a pattern of moving lights, ordinary lives, ordinary choices. For years, I'd been taught that family meant endurance, no matter the cost. Now I knew better. Family without respect is just shared DNA. I picked up my binder from the bookshelf, the same one that had started it all. The plastic edges were scuffed now, fingerprints faded. I flipped to the last page, a spreadsheet I'd made months ago out of habit. Every payment, every transfer, every total. At the bottom, I wrote one more entry. Peace, priceless. Then I closed it for the last time and slid it into a drawer. Spring crept in early, bringing soft rain and the smell of wet earth. On quiet mornings, I'd open the window, letting the breeze lift the curtains. Sometimes I'd hear a faint echo of waves from the white noise app I played at night, a sound I'd chosen myself. The same rhythm they'd been listening to in Maui when they left me behind. Now, it belonged to me. One Sunday, while scrolling through the foundation emails at work, I noticed a name I almost didn't recognize. Rhett Kessler. He'd applied for an internship, my company's entry-level outreach program. His cover letter was earnest, clumsy, apologetic in the way people are when they need something. For a long time, I stared at his application. Then I forwarded it to HR with a note. Process this like any other applicant. 2 weeks later, he got the job. He never knew I was the one who approved it. Some debts don't need announcements. On my 27th birthday, I bought a single slice of cake from the bakery across the street. The woman behind the counter added a candle without asking. I took it home, lit the tiny flame, and let it flicker for a moment before blowing it out. No noise, no crowd. Just the quiet hum of my apartment and the certainty that, for the first time, I was living on my own terms. I thought about the house on Oakwood Lane sometimes, about the echo of my footsteps through its empty rooms, about the final click of the door behind me. But not with bitterness. That house had been a lesson carved in drywall and mortgage statements, that giving endlessly doesn't earn love, it only trains people to take. Outside, the last snow melted into clean pavement. I poured myself another cup of coffee, the rich smell filling the room. I leaned on the balcony railing, watching the morning unfold. Freedom didn't shout, it whispered. And the silence, steady, complete, entirely mine, answered back.